Things are getting heated, Bears Nation. If you don't want to miss the earthquake coming, including those trade bombshells brewing, hit that subscription like it's Montez Sweat's Blitz button. Are you going to let Packers fans find out before? You? Smash that like button and shout in the comments if you demand polls to clean up this mess. Did you really think Dandre Swift was going to be our solution in the backfield? I'm telling you this, after years of watching this team gamble on players who don't fit our culture, Swift's outcome was predictable from day one. Ryan. Polls spent $24 million over 3 years on a back who had only 1,000-yard season in his entire career. One season. And we expected him to suddenly turn into Walter Payton? But here's what really grinds my gears about this whole situation. Swift came in with a career average of 4.6 yards per carry in Detroit. But do you know how many times he rushed over 617 yards before 2023? Never. We had 3 seasons of evidence that this player couldn't be a workhorse, yet polls decided to make him the centerpiece of our rushing attack. The numbers don't lie, Bears fans. Swift ended with 959 rushing yards and an average of 3.8 yards per carry in 2024, his career low. But here's what no one's talking about. Pro Football Focus ranked him as the 43rd out of 47 backs evaluated. 43rd out of 47. That's not just bad. It's catastrophic for a player earning $8 million a year. And you know what that tells me? The issue wasn't just the offensive line, although it was atrocious. Swift showed exactly what he had shown in Detroit: lack of power between the tackles, lack of vision to find holes, and too much tendency to run sideways instead of directly attacking the defense. In Chicago, we need backs who attack, not dance around. But here comes the bombshell ESPN just dropped. Matt Miller, in his 2026 mock draft, is already predicting we'll replace Swift with Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame, a back who last year, as a sophomore, ran for 1,125 yards and 17 touchdowns. Do you know how many yards Swift had in his best college season? 1,144 yards. Love almost matched him being 2 years younger. And listen to this. Love stands 6 feet tall and weighs 206 pounds. That's exactly the build we need in Chicago. A back who can break tackles, but also has the speed for breakaway runs. Do you remember his 98-yard touchdown run against Indiana in the playoffs? That's the explosiveness Swift never gave us. Espen has us picking at 18 in the 2026 draft, which means we'll finally be close to the playoffs. But do you know what's ironic? To get there, we'll probably have to do it in spite of Swift, not because of him. And speaking of our division rivals, let me tell you something that will sting. When we compare our backfield to the rest of the NFC North, Swift isn't even in the top 5. Did you hear that? Our starting back, earning $8 million a year, isn't among the top 5 in our own division. Jahmyr Gibbs from Detroit is number 1, and last year he had 1,412 rushing yards with an average of 5.2 per carry. Gibbs forced 68 missed tackles, and Swift barely got 35. Josh Jacobs went to Green Bay and immediately rushed for 1,329 yards, with 1,039 yards coming after contact. Do you know how many yards after contact Swift had? 624. Less than half of Jacobs. Aaron Jones, now in Minnesota, had 1,138 rushing yards and 1,546 total scrimmage yards. David Montgomery, our former back now in Detroit, would have surpassed 1,000 yards if he hadn't been injured. And even Jordan Mason, Minnesota's backup, is ranked above Swift. Do you know what this tells me? While we gambled on an inconsistent player, all our division rivals strengthened their backfields with backs who understand what it means to run in the Midwest. Backs who attack defenses, break tackles, and get those tough yards win the game. Gets physical. Ben Johnson knows this better than anyone. He was the one in Detroit who moved Swift from starter to change of pace back when he made Jamal Williams the primary runner in 2022. And do you know what happened? Detroit's rushing attack improved immediately. Johnson understands Swift is best in small doses, not as a workhorse. That's why I think Johnson will implement a committee system this year. Roshan Johnson and Kyle Monangai will handle the power situations, Travis Homer will contribute in the passing game, and Swift will be the speed back for specific scenarios. That's the only way to maximize what we have while waiting for polls to correct this mistake in the draft top. Because make no mistake, Bears fans, Swift only averages 2.0 yards before contact. In a city where Matt Fort, Jordan Howard, and even Tarek Cohen found ways to be productive, Swift has not adapted to Chicago's culture. And that's unforgivable. Now, let's talk about Colston Loveland, and here's where things get serious, Bears fans. We used the 10th pick of the draft on this tight end from Michigan, and now Bleacher Report is putting him on red alert before he's even started his professional career. Do you know why this has me completely frustrated? Because in Chicago, we can't afford to make mistakes with first-round picks. First, let's discuss the shoulder surgery. Loveland has missed crucial time during OTAs and minicamp forming chemistry with Caleb Williams. In Ben Johnson's system, the tight end isn't just a receiver. It's an extension of the quarterback on the field. How are you going to develop that connection if you can't even practice at full speed? But here's what really worries me. Brent Sobleski from Bleacher Report says Loveland is going to have a slow start and cites 3 specific factors: surgery, the missed reps, and the presence of Cole Kmet as a veteran. Do you know what that tells me? We're repeating the same mistakes of the past with first-rounders who can't contribute immediately. Let me explain why the comparison with Sam Laporta is unfair and dangerous. Laporta was selected in the second round, pick 34, not in the top 10. When you take a player at pick 10, the expectation is immediate contribution, especially when that player is going to play for the same offensive coordinator who made Laporta a Pro Bowler. Loveland in Michigan had solid numbers: 117 receptions for 1,466 yards and 11 touchdowns over 3 seasons. But here's the problem. Those stats were spread over 3 years. Laporta had 86 receptions, 889 yards, and 10 touchdowns in a single rookie season. Do you see the production difference? And speaking of Ben Johnson, I think he picked Loveland specifically because he wanted a tight end who could replicate what Laporta did in Detroit. But there are factors they're not considering. In Michigan, Loveland played in a system nothing like what Johnson's implementing in Chicago. J.J. McCarthy, not even close to Caleb Williams' level as a passer, but the McCarthy-Loveland connection worked because they had years together. Here in Chicago, Loveland has to learn a whole new system with a second-year quarterback also adapting to a different offensive coordinator. That's the perfect storm for a slow start, and we can't afford it with such a high pick. And do you know what's most frustrating about all this? Cole Kmet is having his best period as a Bear. In 2023, Kmet had 73 receptions for 719 yards. In 2022, he had 7 touchdowns. Those are solid Tay 1 numbers, not for a player who should be replaced with the 10th pick. The rumors that Kmet might be tradable tell me the organization is thinking of using a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends. But do you know what happens when your rookie tight end can't practice at full speed? The whole game plan wobbles because you don't have the necessary chemistry among all components. Ben Johnson keeps praising Kmet, and that gives me hope. Johnson knows he'll need both Kmet and Loveland for his system to work completely. But he also knows that if Loveland isn't ready for week 1, he'll have to rely more on Kmet than he initially planned. And with DJ Moore, Romo Duns, and Luther Burden in the receiver room, opportunities for Loveland to stand out will be limited, especially if he's competing with Kmet for targets. In Detroit, Laporta didn't have that competition. Amon-Ra St. Brown was his only real target competition. Here, Loveland will have to fight with 4 elite receivers for attention. Here's what bugs me the most. We overlook Tyler Warren, many considered as talented as Loveland, because Loveland supposedly had more upside as a pass catcher. But what's that upside worth if he can't be on the field when we need him most? The pressure on Loveland will be immense because fans are expecting immediate production. When you take a tight end in the top 10, you're telling the whole organization that player will be a central piece of your offense. If Loveland can't contribute significantly in his first season, he'll be considered a failed pick, no matter how much potential he may have. And let me be clear, I want Loveland to succeed. His size, 6'5", 245 pounds, and his hands make him a mismatched nightmare when healthy. But the reality is he's entering a situation where he can't afford a long adaptation period. And now we arrive at Tyler Scott, and this story perfectly represents how ruthless this business can be. Here we have a third-round receiver who last year managed just one reception for 5 yards all season. One reception for a player selected. In the fourth round, those numbers are absolutely unacceptable. But before we completely bury him, let me explain why Scott's situation is more complex than it seems. Windy City reports that Scott could save himself if he becomes our main returner for kicks and punts. And here's the interesting part. Last year, Scott returned 8 punts for 207 yards, averaging 25.7 yards per return. Those numbers are actually impressive. To put that in perspective, the league average for punt returns last year was 8.9 yards. Scott is averaging almost triple that. The problem is the volume. Only 8 returns all season. Isn't enough to demonstrate consistency or justify a roster spot. But do you know why I think Scott might have a real chance? Because Ben Johnson is scrutinizing every position and looking for players who can contribute in multiple ways. In Detroit, Johnson used versatile players who could impact different facets of the game. If Scott can dominate the special teams while developing as a receiver, he has a chance. The problem is the competition. Luther Burden arrived from the draft as a dynamic receiver with experience returning kicks in Missouri. Miles Boykin and Devin DuVernay are veterans who have shown they can contribute both on offense and special teams. Scott is competing against players who have proven more professionally. But here's what gives me hope about Scott: his athletic profile. This kid ran a 4.36 in the 40 when he came out of Cincinnati. That speed is exactly what you need to be effective as a returner. And when you watch his college film, Scott had the ability to create separation consistently. The problem last year was opportunity. Scott was behind DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and even Darnell Mooney on the depth chart. He never had a real chance to show what he could do as a receiver. But in special teams, that's where he can carve out a role immediately. Tim Healy from Windy City makes an important point. Scott could be the fourth WR, or he could be pushed aside by veterans like Miles Boykin and Devin DuVernay. That's exactly the situation where special teams becomes the tiebreaker. And you know what tells me about this team's history? We value players who contribute on special teams. From Brendan Iambadeo to Devin Hester, Chicago has always respected players who can change field position. If Scott can become our primary returner and be reliable, he automatically becomes more valuable than a receiver who can only play offense. But here's the real pressure. Scott is in his third year. In the NFL, the third year is make or break for players selected in middle rounds. If you can't establish yourself by your third year, it typically means you don't have what it takes to be a long-term contributor. The addition of Luther Burden complicates things further. Burden isn't only a more talented receiver than Scott right now. He's also younger with more upside. If Johnson has to choose between developing a rookie with more potential versus keeping a third-year player who hasn't produced, the decision is obvious. But Scott has one advantage the others don't. He's desperate. And sometimes, desperation can bring out the best in a player. Scott knows this might be his last chance, not just with Chicago, but potentially in the NFL. That kind of motivation can be powerful. If Scott can become reliable in punt and kick returns, while also showing improvement as a receiver in preseason, he might be able to carve out a role. But he needs to be perfect. He can't afford any fumbles, mental errors, or drops in preseason games. Ben Johnson will be watching closely because he knows special teams can win or lose games. If Scott can give them an advantage in field position while also being a competent backup receiver that makes him valuable despite his lack of production so far, the bottom line with Scott is simple: contribute on special teams or go home. There's no middle ground for a player in his situation. Either he finds a way to make himself indispensable as a returner, or he'll be looking for a job with another team. Look, Bears fans, these three situations tell us everything we need to know about where this organization is headed. Ryan Poles isn't playing, and Ben Johnson is implementing a culture where every position is earned day by day. The situation with Swift has me worried because it represents everything that's been wrong with this organization in recent years. We spend big money on players that don't fit our culture, and then we're surprised when they don't produce. Swift earning $8 million per year to be ranked 43rd out of 47 running backs is absolutely unacceptable. Due. You think Swift will be able to turn things around and justify those $24 million? Or is it time to admit we need a running back with a Chicago mentality? Let me know in the comments what you think about the future of our backfield. With Loveland, I'm trying to remain optimistic, but the red flags are there. When you draft a tight end in the top 10, you need immediate contribution. If Loveland can't be ready for week 1 because of his surgery, that puts enormous pressure on Cole Kmet and potentially limits what Ben Johnson can do offensively. Are you worried about Loveland's slow start? Or do you trust that Ben Johnson will know how to manage both Kmet and Loveland effectively? Because if this doesn't work, it's going to be another first-round pick that didn't live up to expectations. And Tyler Scott represents every bubble player fighting for his career. His story is either going to be an inspirational comeback or a cautionary tale about wasted potential. If he can become our primary returner while also developing as a receiver, maybe he has a future here. But if he can't contribute on special teams, he's gone. Do you think Scott deserves another opportunity to prove himself? Or is it time to move on and give his spot to younger talent? Because I guarantee you that tomorrow we'll have more explosive news about the changes coming for Chicago. And you can't miss what's coming for this city that deserves a winning team. Smash. Okay, if you believe Swift's cycle in Chicago is complete, subscribe if you trust that Poles knows what he's doing with these moves. This is the most passionate Bears community on YouTube, and here we're family. Join us because together we're going to live every moment of this season that could be historic for Chicago. Go Bears! And we'll see you in the next video.